On this episode of Whitetail Cribs, we're headed to southeast Ohio to visit with the Reed family. The Reeds have over 71 Pope and Young whitetails and over 10,000 inches of bone and just one trophy room. You guys are going to want to check this out. It is extremely incredible. We have some awesome episodes here in the pipeline for the next couple weeks, so be sure to hit that subscribe button and leave us a comment if you enjoyed the episode. Now let's go.
Hello, I'm James Reed. You guys come on in, we'll show you some of our deer here at the Reed family. This is my two sons, Hunter Reed and Wyatt Reed. And deer hunting's been a big part of our family. Started each one of these kids out when they were 6 years old. Hunter's 22, he's killed 12 Pope and Young deer, and Wyatt, 16, he's got 7 Pope and Young deer. We started taking these kids hunting when they're just real small, and it's been a big part of our family our whole life. It's my daughter and my son-in-law both hunt every year. And my daughter, she's killed 4 deer over 140 here in the last 4 years. And my son-in-law, he's shot one every year too. We'll show you guys around a little bit, show you our collection of deer. We'll take you out and show you the kids' deer. And we've been working on this building. We haven't got it completely finished. We've been working on family photos and stuff, but here's the deer that Hunter's killed. When Hunter was 6 years old, I took him hunting. And one thing that's always amazed me with him, he's never festered a deer and he's never missed a deer. And you know, that's hard for any hunter to ever say something like that, but every time he shot a deer, it's been double lung shot deer. But all the deer is very, you know, to us, a lot of memories here on the wall with deer he shot. But this is the first nice buck he killed, and he was just really small. It's a 115-inch deer. It's not a Pope and Young deer here on the end. But I was scouting on a piece of state property, and this deer stood up and looked at me. He was laying in some weeds, and I snuck off, and I came home and got a pop-up blind, and I'd set it up and waited on him to get home from school. And at 3:30 we ran to the weed field and got in the blind. We was there 15 minutes. The deer stood up and walked in, and he shot it in the neck, and we tracked this deer for like 75 yards. And I just remember how exciting it all was, you know. Back at the time when he'd shot this, it was a giant to us. I mean, but that got him pumped and got him started. Here's some of the deer Wyatt shot. He's got a couple still taxidermist shop we haven't got back. He was kind of a little different than Hunter. When I started him out, everything he'd shoot at, he'd miss. And I remember the first deer he killed, it was late season, and we'd done shot at 4 or 5 deer, and he kept missing them. And finally, he killed a doe that winter. And he shot it, and he stuck it in the side of the head. And I looked at him, he said that's where he was aiming, but I knew better than that. I'll take you over and show you the deer that I've killed. I've been successfully hunting trophy whitetails for 40 years, and I've shot 71 Pope and Young deer with a bow and a crossbow. And I'll take you guys over and show you my collection of deer. I'd like to show you some of my family pictures here on the wall. This was my grandfather. He was a big trapper back in the 70s, and I remember him taking me on the trap line, and that gave me a big interest for the outdoors. And 13 years old, fur prices was high. Here's some pictures back from my high school days. I was catching a couple hundred fox a season. It got me into the outdoors, trapping and stuff. Here's a picture of my uncles in 1959. Couple trophy deer that they'd shot. I'd put this on the wall here in my business. This is a picture of my father, 1969. They came back from a deer hunting trip from Virginia, and that was the trophy that he had shot there. I'll show you some of my deer that I've shot. I've shot 60 deer over 160 inches, and they're all on this wall. I've got a couple of them that's not up there right now. There's 28 deer on the wall. This is the best scoring deer I've shot. It's around 200 inches. It's got 17 scoreable points. I sat on that deer 13 days in a row from daylight to dark, hunting that deer, and on the 14th day I went somewhere else and the deer walked in. I was sick. So the next morning I went back, and the next evening I went in and I shot the deer that evening. So he was showing up every 5-6 days, and I knew he was going to show himself in the daytime, and I knew that eventually he was going to make a mistake. And he was a really sharp deer. He'd been there. We'd had pictures of him for 3 previous years. And I had access to 200-acre farm to hunt that deer on. And I had multiple cameras in there. And he had only one camera that he was actually tripping. And the other spots seemed to be dead. And I set up in there in a box blind. It was kind of a pitch point place in between. I had some corn scattered around in there. But the evening I shot him, a doe had came up the hill, and I was watching her. She was in the corn, and just right at dusk, I looked and I could see the outline of his rack, and he was standing behind a tree over the bank. And then he kept watching the doe, and he eased up the hill, and he stepped out there, and I was watching him, and I didn't know if I could get an arrow through there because there was like some trees sitting there covering him up. And I picked a spot and I shot. And the deer jumped and ran over the bank, and I thought, man, I hope I hit that deer. When I walked out, I'd hit him right in the heart. Deer went about 10-15 yards, was laying there dead. And when I picked him up, the pictures I had of him, I never dreamed he was more than 180-inch deer. And when I picked him up, I thought, that deer's 200 inches. I mean, you know, he amazed me. He carries a 5.5-inch circumference measurement through the whole rack. That's the best scoring deer I've ever killed. I've shot 2 other deer. It's 190 inches. I've killed 16 deer. It's like 170-inch gross or better. This deer here, this buck here is a Boone and Crockett deer. It nets 178. I had one picture of this deer. He came in 2 weeks earlier. I had a picture of him about midnight underneath a crabapple tree. So I didn't have any more pictures of him, and I went in on opening day of bow season, and I was in a box blind. It was a 45-yard shot. I hit him right here. But I think other hunters had spooked him out that morning and run him up the hill to me. But like I said, that's the first Boone and Crockett deer that I killed. I had very little chance, I think, of actually killing that deer. And there's 8 deer on the wall over 180. This deer here is kind of strange. It's got 22 scoreable points, 14-inch inside spread. I call him the compact kid. He's 183 inches. It's kind of an unusual deer. This deer is 190. This buck here is probably one of the biggest frame bucks I've ever killed. He's a basic 8-point frame. He's got 7-inch bases, 9-inch brows, 22 inside, 6.5 out here. He's a 173-inch deer. This buck here, he's 173. This deer's 187. This buck here was killed the first week of bow season. I shot him, and there was a deer I'd watched all summer long, and I shot at it. It was at least 180 inches. Camera had sat there all summer long, and I shot at it and missed it. And I was just sick to blew the opportunity. 3 days later, this deer showed up. The other deer didn't come back, so this deer showed up and ended up killing it. And you know, I never even knew it existed. It just kind of popped in. But this deer here is a 190-inch deer. It was shot here close to my house. Shot this deer in 2002. On opening day of bow season, me and my brother, within minutes apart, aired 2 deer. His was a 180-inch deer. It was featured in Rack magazine, and it was on Hoyt's website on their page. We was both shooting Hoyt bows at the time, and he'd shot his deer and I'd shot mine within 5 minutes of each other, and we was a few miles away apart. But I'd had some video footage of this deer in January. He was a 163-inch 10-point, and I'd got access to hunt the property. The next year I'd run multiple cameras on the farm. Couldn't even get a buck on camera. And I was parking my truck down here by the road, and there was this big dead-end point. The farm was like 200 acres, and I was all over it running cameras and trying to pick up this buck. And me and my brother was coming off the hill, and I noticed these little rubs on the bank. And I said, you know, I'm going to put some corn out here and put a camera. My brother said, well, it's probably just a squirrel or buck, because it was just little rubs and stuff. We dumped the corn out. It was this buck and another 150-inch deer that was making the sign. So I'm not a believer in big rubs, big deer. I've sat and watched trees as big as your leg rubbed by every deer in the woods. And a lot of times I think people just, you know, that early buck sign, you start finding them rubs, and I don't think it matters how big they are. You know, I don't think that tells anything. And that proved it to me on that deer. But I had put a tree stand up and came back, and I killed the deer on the first time in. And another remarkable story about the deer, I got in the tree at like 3 o'clock in the day, and about 5, 6 o'clock in the evening, a group of does that came down the ridge, and they wouldn't quit blowing at me. And they just blowed and blowed, and I thought, well, this thing's over with. I might as well get out of the tree. And I just couldn't get the does to leave. They just stand there and keep blowing. So I actually just stood up in the tree and started waving my arms, and they blowed and run up the hill. 30 minutes after that happened, I heard something coming around the hill, and this buck and another buck had made its way down to the thicket. I was on a pinch point, on a dead end point, and it was kind of a tight spot. I was up in the tree about 40 yards high in the tree, but they came in, they stopped in this little thicket, and it was kind of getting late evening, and the other buck had walked out, and he spooked and took off. And I thought, man, it's over with, you know, I'm done. And that deer walked out, and I got a shot at him at 10 yards. And I shot him down through the back, and I come out of the tree, and I couldn't find no blood or no air. So then I started looking, and it was after dark, and I was looking, and I was ready to give up, and I was sitting on a log, and all of a sudden I looked behind me and I seen its belly, and I'd walk right past the deer. So I thought, you know, if I don't get this deer, I'm going to quit deer hunting, because the stress, you know, there's nothing any worse than a hunter to get an opportunity to deer like that. And at the time, I had never seen a deer or had a picture of one over 160 inches. And, you know, I killed a deer in 2002, and really there wasn't, the cameras had only been out. The good camera systems had just been out a few years. You know, back in the early 90s, the first cameras took film. But like I said, when we got that deer on camera, everybody looked at it. We thought that deer was like 250 inches, and we thought we had us a world record. But when I killed it, you know, he come up 190, but he was big enough for me anyhow at the time. But you know, every one of these deer's got a story behind it, endless stories, and stuff chased them. And the big deer on the top's the widest rack buck I've ever shot. It's got 29-inch main beams, and it's 23-inch inside. It's only 163-inch 10-point. But I watched the deer for 2 years, and I'd hunted for it 5 or 6 times. And the evening it walked out, I shot it through the back, couldn't find my arrow on that deer either. And anyhow, I looked everywhere for it, come back the next morning and looked. And the next day I came back, and he was hanging in a grapevine, had run his head, and was about 5-10 yards from where I'd parked my four-wheeler the evening before. And I couldn't find any blood, kind of overlooked him, you know. And I've kept every animal I've shot, I've took a picture of it, put it on the wall my whole life. I like the pictures myself, probably as well as the mounts. You know, I like the pictures and stuff, but like I said, it's been 40 years, and a lot of memories and a lot of time spent. It's been basically the only interest I've ever had in my life is the outdoors and hunting and stuff. And with the business and stuff, I've been given a lot of opportunity to hunt all over and met a lot of people. And like I said, I've really enjoyed the outdoors. I've got right around 50 deer over 150 inches that I've shot. Here's some of the other deer on this wall. There's a few deer in the 130s and some 140s here. Well, you guys, I just appreciate getting to share with you my life, the things that I've done. This is a deer I've shot. It's been a long road, and I've enjoyed every minute of it, hunting and chasing deer all over the country. We've enjoyed the outdoors and enjoyed getting to share these with you today. So thanks for watching. We'll see you in the woods.